The most powerful character in One Piece is Bird. He may not have the physical strength of an emperor, the military might of a world government, or some sort of super ancient weapon, but Big News Morgans has something even more powerful at his disposal. He is more influential than any single entity on this planet, and if he deemed fit, he could topple the world government with a single article. But I'm not here to talk about what Morgans could do, I'm here to talk about what he's already done. Big News Morgans has created kingdoms, emperors, heroes, villains, and potentially the greatest accomplishment of all, he created the Pirate King. I'm not exaggerating, unlike Morgans. He has influenced this world on a scale that no other character could even dream of. And for what reason? I may be a miser, but I am first and foremost a journalist. I am a DJ of words, one who occasionally spins lies to move the hearts of the people. I decide what gets published. So the goal of Big News Bird is to essentially tell the best story possible. The most exciting, the most heartbreaking, the most fearsome, the most euphoric, the most whatever it is. Doesn't really matter what the emotion is, what Morgans wants is for his readers to feel. And that is exactly what makes him so dangerous. Because Morgans isn't telling a fictional story. He's manipulating reality, casting living people in the roles that he selects for them, and then creating characters for the world to both love and hate. And in fact, I don't think it would be an exaggeration to state that the very fate of the world depends entirely on which outcome Morgans believes would be the most exciting. Don't believe me? Well, here's a small example. Sora, Warrior of the Sea. This is a comic strip that has been published in Morgan's newspaper, the World Economic Journal, for literally decades now. And as a result, absolutely everyone in the North Blue knows and fears the Germa Kingdom. The comic is about a marine hero named Sora, who regularly faces off against the supervillains that are the Germa 66. And the comic serves two purposes, as explained by Vito of the Fire Tank Pirates. From what I hear, the story is based on the true exploits of the heroes within the Navy. In other words, it was propaganda for the kids. So purpose number one, it glorifies the Marines. Sora is the hero and it makes them look like the good guys. But the thing you'll start to notice about Morgans is that he very rarely takes just one side. Because remember, his goal is to stir the hearts of everyone, and everyone is everyone. And I think that Vito again puts it best. But that wasn't what got me fascinated with it. It was the Germa, the army of evil that used a variety of forces and weapons to put the screws on Sora each time. Sure, they always lost in the end, but I cheered like hell for him, and that's not an uncommon opinion amongst Sora readers. In fact, in a very Batman-style effect, the villains tend to be more popular than the hero. And so Morgans continues to publish Sora because it inspires children to become both heroes and villains of the world, depending on which faction they most identify with. And characters like Vito became what they did due to that inspiration. Think of Sora as Big News Morgans planting seeds, influencing people from a young age so that Morgans can go on to use them as both heroes and villains in the future. But you know what? Let's have a more tangible example. Arguably, Morgan's biggest slow burn project to date has been the Worst Generation, a very unique opportunity in time presented on Sabadi Archipelago, with an incident involving a world noble, a marine admiral, and 11 rookie pirates with bounties over 100 million berries. This was a big news gift. You have two of the highest authorities in the world, a world noble and a marine admiral, going up against this ragtag group of rookies. And of course, the most exciting way to portray that is by emphasizing the underdogs. I don't know why that's emphasis. We shouldn't do that. And so he created the Worst Generation. Because here's a fun fact, I can't speak for the anime because the anime does weird things, but in the manga, the term supernova or super rookie isn't used until well after the actual events of Sabadi. It's in the title of chapter 498, the 11 supernovas, but that's it. No character on Sabadi coined that term. It was selected after the event by, say, a certain someone who wanted to create some sort of new and exciting group of villains to follow. Or are they heroes? I don't know. I also don't care. It doesn't matter so long as it's exciting. And this newfound notoriety was a big boost to these pirate crews. For example, take Cavendish, someone who was every bit as dangerous, if not more at the time than the supernovas. However, when Morgans dropped Cavendish as a main character from the World Economic Journal, he lost almost all name recognition and faded into obscurity. Meanwhile, Morgan's chosen ones were allowed to trade off their new global recognition, forming alliances with emperors, forming alliances with each other, and one even became a warlord of the sea. And ultimately, with the addition of Blackbeard, the group evolved into the Worst Generation, a name almost certainly given by Morgans as well, because he gives all names, all of them. But the plan goes as follows. Morgan seeds these figures as supernovas, then he cultivates them as Worst Generation members, and finally, one of them is intended to be harvested as the next pirate Pirate King. The way I see it, Stussy, in the near future, one of the worst generation is going to rise to claim the mantle of the Pirate King. This isn't just an insightful bird-based prediction. This is Morgan's giving away the game plan of his narrative. The way he sees it, the most exciting story to be told is one where one of these individuals claims the title. And to be fair, why wouldn't it be? Morgan's has been deliberately developing these characters over the course of years now. And yes, I say characters because the way people like Luffy are portrayed in the World Economic Journal is nothing like how they are in reality. The world sees Luffy purely through bird vision as this sort of distorted, evil, chaotic mastermind. But we'll get more into that in a bit, because before that, Morgan's had another saga-long story to pay off first. This albatross was instrumental in constructing the Paramount War, because the World Economic Journal was the outlet that published Ace's public execution information, which was used to lure Whitebeard into Marineford at a specific time on a specific day. Very helpful for the world government, but what was less than helpful is what Morgan's did immediately following the war. When Luffy, Jinbei, and Rayleigh re-invaded the island to ring the Oxbell, it was Morgan's who made the decision to publish that event, which we know because we have a Marine complaining at great length about this decision. It was described as brand new as, "It highlights our failure to capture him. There is no greater humiliation than this." If it were up to the world government, this incident would have been kept quiet. But it wasn't up to the world government, it was up to Bird. And Bird saw an opportunity to stir some more hearts. I mean, a pirate mourning for his fellow brother pirate. It's, the emotion, it's too good to resist. And so his decision led to all of the Straw Hats receiving the 3D2Y message. So without Morgan's, they all would have returned to Sabadi and not received the training gifted to them by Bartholomew Kuma. Alright, let's step back a bit though. Or forward a bit. Arc-wise forward, time-wise backwards. To Fishman Island, and let's have a bit of a quick quiz. Before the rise of Monkey D. Dragon, who held his title of the greatest criminal in the world? Was it A, Fisher Tiger? Yes, it was. I can't be bothered to continue with the others. But it was legit Fisher Tiger, who was considered to be the world's greatest criminal at the time. A legacy crafted by his one-man invasion of Marijois, but a legacy capitalized on and spread at great length by Big News Morgans, which we know because in Fisher Tiger's flashback, you can see a young Hody Jones and the future New Fishman pirates reading the World Economic Journal. Morgan's, by the way, is 53 in the current timeline, so back here he would have been about 37. Still well and truly in charge of Big Bird News. But this was a pivotal moment in history. Not because anything big actually happened, but more so due to a relative lack of big things happening. The one and only Pirate King, Goldie Roger, had been executed 8 years prior, and since then the world had been lacking an interesting villain to follow. But Fisher Tiger was the new main antagonist that Morgan's had been waiting for. That's why the actual message of the Sun Pirates was never spread, which, as a refresher, was, in Fisher Tiger's own words, "I break the unjust laws of this world, but only to free the oppressed. The Sun Pirates fight for freedom and liberty." It almost sounds like a bit of a preliminary revolutionary army, and of course the Sun Pirates had a very strict no-killing policy. However, in all of the newspapers, Fisher Tiger was portrayed as an overly brutal embodiment of vengeance on humanity, a monster who would not be stopped until each and every human had been wiped off the planet. Again, Morgan's was able to do the Morgan's thing where he stirred hearts. He stirred a lot of fear into that particular heart dish. Fear in humans, that is, but he stirred hope into certain fishmen. People often wonder how Hody Jones and his crew morphed into the terrifying zealots they became, but it was because of Morgan's. All he ever published about Fisher Tiger was designed to induce a sense of cruelty and bloodthirsty terror towards humans. And so, naturally, that became the role model that the young fishmen were looking up to. In reality, Fisher Tiger was a very compassionate man who absolutely detested senseless violence. And if Morgan's had portrayed Tiger differently, then Hody Jones may have turned out differently. But Morgan's needed that new main antagonist, and Fisher Tiger was cast for the role, which is a great example of the very real dangers of treating reality as a story. For one of his less subtle maneuvers, Morgan's is obviously responsible for Luffy becoming an Emperor of the Sea, given that Morgan's was the one who crowned him twice actually. But the first time is one of the rare examples where we actually get insight into what was actually written in the article. The newspaper stated that according to reliable sources, Straw Hat Luffy already had 7 powerful pirate crews under his sway, combining the authority of a captain with over 5,000 followers, the notoriety of brotherhood with both Ace and the number 2 of the revolutionaries, Sabo, the extreme charisma and leadership to assume impromptu command over the formidable trio of the army of evil Germa 66, the Sun Pirates, and the Fire Tank Pirates, the calculated strategic brilliance to execute the destruction of the Queen's castle, and the strength to defeat her officers, worth 800 million and 1 billion berries. The result of this incident was clear to all. Straw Hat Luffy was victorious. It was the arrival of the 5th Emperor of the Sea. Now, we know that almost everything stated here is either an extremely biased reading of the situation or an outright lie. But that doesn't matter, because to Morgans, this was his big Infinity War MCU moment. This article only works because Morgans himself had cultivated every faction that was involved. His Sora comic had been instilling fear in the very real Germa Kingdom for decades. He invoked the name of the Sun Pirates, led by former World Economic Journal main antagonist Fisher Tiger. The Fire Tank Pirates are of course part of Morgan's Worst Generation project, and then at the helm of all of those threads, Morgans plonked Luffy, because that was the most interesting way to tell the story. He could have said it was a plot masterminded by Capone Gang Beige, which is actually much closer to the truth. He could have even gone so far as to claim that Capone was now the 5th Emperor, but that just wouldn't have been quite as exciting though. And the same goes for the post-Wano Emperor shift as well. Luffy, Law, and Kid were given equal bounties by the world government, and so officially they were equal threats. But remembering that the world government does not choose who becomes an emperor, it was Morgans who took that one step further by electing to fill that power vacuum with Luffy, which makes sense because after Whole Cake Island, Morgans very much had Luffy set up as an emperor in waiting. So it was a very natural choice for his story. And just to emphasize how malleable and frankly irrelevant truth actually is, we have the current Egghead Island arc, where Morgans has already written the conclusion to an event that has yet to happen. Morgans has decided that he's going to stir hearts by claiming that Luffy has kidnapped Dr. Vegapunk. That's just how insanely powerful he is. Morgans essentially has the ability to write reality. Not literally, of course, but consensus becomes truth, and Morgans has the power to manufacture consensus. Interestingly enough, Morgans has also crowned a second emperor recently, being Flame Emperor Sabo. In chapter 956, Morgans was offered a bribe by the world government not to publish the Cobra murder story, to which Morgans said, yeah, nah, and published it anyway, along with a photo of Sabo standing over Cobra's corpse. And as always, this served a dual purpose. To those who sympathize with the world government, this was terror, absolutely terror-inducing, leading us to consume more and more news over concern for our safety. And for those against the world government, this was a complete triumph, leading us to consume more and more news to bask in the glory that was this brutal murder. And Sabo has now become a character with influence potentially greater than Dragon himself, with the Flame Emperor title being chosen specifically to draw a connection between Sabo and his brother Luffy. A parallel narrative, if you will, with both brothers upending the old systems in their respective fields, which is quite literally stated by one of the new Sabo worshippers, a designation that I use, again with no exaggeration, because people are quite literally starting to view Sabo as some sort of deity. And it's all because a big bird man decided to publish this story. Because a global revolution seems like a pretty funky story arc for the World Economic Journal, and I mean, no matter who wins, both sides are still buying those newspapers. But inevitably, it will almost certainly fall to Morgans to officially crown the next Pirate King, just as he's been planning. The real shock here is that he also crowned the first Pirate King. Roger himself only found out that he was the Pirate King after reading the World Economic Journal. In fact, he may have literally been one of the last people to find out that he was now a monarch, an event which happened 25 years ago, so Morgans would have been about 28 years old at the time. So to be fair here, it could have been his predecessor, but the time range is still well within Morgans' active career. And you know what? It doesn't matter which bird it was specifically. What matters is that Morgans has that power right now. And that title from that bird who wrote that newspaper gave Roger the notoriety to use this title to start the golden age of piracy, giving birth to decades of storyline for the World Economic Journal to create. Big News Morgans is a man of unparalleled power. He controls emotions, he controls consensus, he controls truth, he controls history, and to some degree, he even controls the future. Luffy has no greater ally in this world and no greater enemy. So all we can hope is that Luffy's story will be deemed the most exciting to tell.